here in the kitchen with me. Today we are going to talk all about your sourdough starter, how to get your sourdough starter to go from this to this nice, lovely, full jar. And I'm going to bring you closer now. Let's bring you a little closer so that you can see what I'm doing. But I am so glad. Okay, goodness. Welcome to my first live. I'm figuring this out. And there we go. Now you can see me. I'm trying this on my phone this time. If we don't like it on the phone, I'll use my computer next time. But for this one, we're in the midst of all of the goodness of summertime, which means the sourdough starter goes through like ebbs and flows of getting used. And we're headed into one of those like ebbs where it's not going to get used for a couple weeks. And so I did a big feeding on my sourdough starter. I'm going to put some of that back into my main jar. We're going to talk through that. But one of the biggest questions that I have been getting, and good morning, Cynthia. I'm glad you're here. So one of the biggest questions that I get from so many people. So just know that if you're asking this question or you're having this challenge, you are not alone. So many people have said, I've fed my sourdough starter and it didn't do anything. What do I do? So let's talk just about that. We're going to talk about how to feed your starter, and then we're also going to dive into like, what do you do if it doesn't rise, okay? So here's the starter that I keep in my fridge. Sometimes it's very, very little like this. Other times it gets much bigger because I like had too much starter to use and I have like way too much discard. But right now we have this. So if this is what you have in your fridge and you're thinking, how in the world do I get this amount to become this amount? We start with one feeding, okay? I don't ever want to use up everything that I have in the fridge, but it's okay if we scrape this jar clean and we just add some back into it later. So for those of you that have said, I fed my starter and it's not doing anything, it's not rising, it's not waking up, here's the very first thing you're gonna do. And this first step is what you will repeat as many times as you need to until your starter is rising, until you can tell that it's rising. So for my first step, which I can't bring you over here during the live, I don't know how to do that. I'm learning. So I'm going to figure out more about this. But hello, Michelle. I see you. And Miso, Judy, Chris. I'm so glad that you guys are all here. Please know that I'm going to be checking on here. And if you have questions, pop them down in there. And then once I finish one section, I'll answer those questions, okay? So this is my very first feeding. My starter is cold from the fridge. It's very dormant. I've been using it about once a week. The longer that your starter has been in the fridge or has been dormant, you haven't been baking with it, the more feedings that you will need to do in order to get it to wake up. And it's not that it is not alive or it's dead or something's wrong with it. It's just that it's kind of weak. So like, okay, think about when you first go back to the gym, you haven't worked out forever and you're like, oh my word, I could barely do what I did before. That's what your starter is. It's just kind of wimpy, okay? And if there's liquid on the top, any liquid on the top, you're gonna stir it back in. The only reason that you don't want to stir the liquid in is if it's green, if it's pink, or it smells like a dirty baby diaper. If it's any of those things, your starter is dead. Get rid of it. It has bad bacteria in it. Now, the darker that the hooch gets, the more dormant your starter is. So as that hooch starts to turn darker and darker black, it just means your starter is gonna need several feedings to wake up. And there's lots of debate. And I always think when there's lots of debate, there's multiple ways to do something, because sourdough's so forgiving. There's so many ways that you can make really great sourdough. And so my goal is to help you get your starter to wake up. And then in a little bit, we'll talk about this too, that big batch of dough. But some people think you should not stir the hooch in, don't do it, dump it out. Okay, fine, you can do that. If you dump your hooch out, you need to add a little bit of water to your starter, because that hooch was the liquid that was in the starter, and so your starter is going to be like really thick. Now, the guru who taught me how to make sourdough, she just always said, you just stir it back in. The only time I've ever dumped mine off was when it was getting really dark, and I just was like, I don't really want my starter to be that dark. But here's the cool thing. When your starter is very dormant and there's all that hooch on there and you stir it back in and you're concerned that you're going to get like way too strong of a sourdough flavor, you're not, because this very first part of the feeding, we're only going to take 15 grams out of here. And when we do that 15 grams, it is going to get fed multiple times. And by the time you get to baking, whatever it is you're going to bake, that really strong initial starter, that's not really what you're baking with. You're baking with this like beefed up, very diluted version of it. So that's all the stuff about hooch. Anybody have questions about the hooch? Oh, hello Stephanie. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, if you have questions about the hooch, pop them in there. But I will say, my friend who taught me, her little brother, he really wanted to taste the hooch, and he said it is disgusting. I've never tasted it, but I think they call it hooch because it's probably some form of moonshine. Like, it probably could make a pretty strong drink, but I don't want to drink it. So here's our first feeding, and this is the first feeding that you're going to repeat if your starter does not do any movement, no bubbles, it's not growing, okay? First feeding, I have my scale on. I have tared my scale, which to tear your scale means to zero it out, so that what you're looking at on the screen is 0 grams. Make sure your scale says G. You want the grams, okay? And we're gonna put 15 grams in. That's all. It's not very much starter. And the reason why I encourage you to start with such a small amount is because, there we go, we're at 15. Okay, look at how small that is. It's hardly anything. Now, you could start with even less than this, and you would be able to build up a really beefy leaven, which is your fed starter. So just know that if you've gotten down to like the little dregs of your sourdough starter, it's okay. You still have enough live active bacteria or yeast, it's like a natural yeast, to be able to do your starter. Oh my goodness, Rita, you've baked 8 loaves. Oh my word, that is so awesome. That makes me so happy. I feel so happy for you and your family. Okay, here's our first feeding. We have 15 grams of starter in. We are going to add 15 grams of water. I just like to tear the scale because I don't then have to pay attention to adding anything. Okay, once you have your water in, I suggest that you stir it up really good, because it's just a little bit easier to get that starter mixed in, and then we're going to add our flour. And I really like these small little spatulas because you can get them down into your jar really easy and stir, and you can wipe the sides. Wiping the sides is really helpful, mainly so that you can see if your sourdough starter has beefed up and moved it all. Okay, so right now we have 15 grams of starter, 15 grams of water, and let's get our flour. Now, so you can use the water from your tap. We use the water from our tap, but we have really great water. It tastes good. There's no weird flavor in it. It doesn't taste like sulfur or chlorine or anything. If you feel like you're like, my water does not taste very good, you could just use bottled water. You could use the filtered water from your fridge. Somebody asked about a reverse osmosis. Sure. You can use all of that water. You just want, if your water just has a lot of flavor in it, I mean, I think that the sourdough yeast would probably gobble it up. You wouldn't taste it, but that's why some people use filtered water. But because my starter was cold from the fridge, I like to use just like lukewarm to kind of warm water because we're trying to like give it a zap to get it going. Okay, now we're gonna add in 15 grams, and once again, my scale is tiered. We're gonna do 15, oops, I went over. No, I didn't, okay, 15 grams of flour. Now, this is very little, and you're gonna look at this and think that's not enough to make a recipe. You're right. But here's the thing, we're trying to get the starter going. We're trying to get it to wake up, and it's easier to do that with a smaller amount simply because you might need to do another feeding or another. You might have to do 3 or 4 feedings, and you don't want to be working with this amount of starter, putting in gobs of flour. That's when you start getting way too much discard, way too much flour wasted, and it feels like you're like, oh my word, I'm wasting my time. So start with a small amount, and it's all stirred up in there. The reason why people do like a rubber band on their jar or they do a line on their jar is because they're wanting to be able to see, did my starter do anything? Did it get bigger? I don't use the line or the rubber band anymore because I can still look at it and be like, oh yeah, it's fluffed up. So use this though until you can tell like what's going on with your starter and is it getting bigger? Okay, any questions about this first feeding? I think this is the part where people are like, I did the first feeding, what do I do now? Okay, so the sourdough starter is going to be the absolute happiest when it's summertime because the climate, so we live near Seattle and it's just a really lovely climate, 75, 80, 85-ish degrees. On those 90-degree days, the starter goes so fast. If it is a really cold time of year for you or you keep your house really cool, then put your starter somewhere that it's gonna be around 65 to 70 degrees. So in your microwave, if you have one over your stove, if you turn the light on under the microwave, there it's on. It's not turning a light on in the microwave, but it makes the microwave this like amazing proofing box. So you can put your starter straight in there and set it in there and set a timer on your phone for like 4 hours because you want to check it in 4 hours. So do this very first feeding in the morning so that you have time to come back and check it and see what's going on. You don't want to do this first feeding and go to bed because you're not going to be able to see what's going on with it. It should have, like if it is awake and ready for you to bake, it will have bubbled up and pretty much doubled in size within 4 hours. And that is what this is. This is a much larger amount of starter that I fed, and it has now risen to fill the jar, or it's almost filling the jar. So do your first feeding in the morning, put it into your microwave, or you can do the same thing in your oven. Turn the light on in your oven, pop it in there, or if your house is really warm, great. It just needs to be about 65 to 70 degrees. If it is not warm enough in your house, the starter will just be really slow to wake up. Some people even say if they just put it on, like if you have a certain kind of stove that you could put it on the back of your stove, that's another warm spot. Other people have talked about using like a heating pad, or like, you know, if you do any seed starting, the seed mats that you put under your like seed starting trays, those you can use as well. But you just want to be careful. You're not wanting to blast this with heat. You don't want it to be like where it's like actually cooking the bottom of it. So be mindful of that. Another friend said on cold days, she would put it by her wood stove, which I do that sometimes in the winter, just near it where it's getting more heat. So just think of where is the best spot in your house where it's going to be 65 to 70 degrees so that this can wake up. Now, what happens if in 4 hours you go and check it and you're like, it looks exactly like what it looked like when we started. It hasn't done a thing. Okay, that's where this small amount is so helpful, okay? What you have in your jar is sourdough starter. And when we take a portion of it out, we don't want to throw it away because you can use it. So let's say we're going to pretend that this sat for 4 hours. Hi, Gabby. Oh, you just made your first loaves? Oh, they came out flat. Okay, we'll talk about that. Don't worry. Sourdough takes practice, and some of it comes back to how strong was your starter and a couple other things, which we'll get to. Okay, so we did our first feeding, and we are pretending that this has sat for 4 hours, and it did nothing. It didn't grow at all. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to repeat the first feeding exactly. But we have too much starter in our jar. So here's the cool thing about starter, and this takes a small amount of math. Everything that you put into it is a simple addition problem. So we did 15 grams of starter, 15 grams of water, 15 grams of flour, which adds up to 45 grams. So our mother starter jar, our main one that lives in the fridge, I'm going to put it back onto my scale. I'm turning it on, and I'm going to tear it out. It doesn't matter how much is in this jar right now because we're not going to take anything out of it. What we're trying to do is get this amount back down to 15 grams, okay? So what we're going to do is, because we fed it 15, 15, 15, that's 45, I want to take out 30 grams. So I'm going to add 30 grams into my main jar here. Don't worry that it hasn't done anything. It hasn't like woken up or anything. No big deal. That sourdough live yeast is in there. It's just not going very fast or active yet. And so we don't want to throw that away because we'll be able to use it later. Okay, sorry, I gotta pay attention here. Make sure that I take out the right amount. Okay, I'm at 27. I'm getting back down so that all that's left in my jar here is going to be 15 grams. Okay, now we got 30 grams out. Now I just fed my main jar. It doesn't need to sit out. Put the lid back on loosely, back into the fridge it goes. We didn't waste anything, and look, we also didn't end up with like this massive amount of discard. Because I'm like you, I don't want to have jar upon jar of discard sitting around. That feels so frustrating, and it kind of gives me like baking anxiety because I'm like, I gotta use it. Okay, so now what's in our jar is 15 grams of starter, and it's a real quiet, not super active, but it's one step closer to getting there. So we're going to tear this out, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add 15 grams of water. Oops, okay, a little bit more. It's amazing how little it is, okay? Pull it off your scale. It isn't good to stir on your scale. I do it sometimes, and people give me a hard time. But it's because I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, and I wasn't thinking about stirring on the scale. So don't stir on your scale. You can mess up the like calibration or something in it. So we mixed up the water. Now I'm going to tear the scale out, add our 15 grams of flour. And I go so slow because it doesn't need very much. There we go. We're going to stir this up, and we're going to do it again. We're going to set it in the microwave or somewhere warm. Now, second feeding means that would be like maybe around lunchtime that you checked it and you're like, oh my goodness, it didn't rise. So do the second feeding because most likely it will have made some bubbles and some activity by the time you get to the evening when you're making dinner. And here's my goal with all of these feedings and all of it is that I can get it all squished down into one day. That's the only day I have to think about it, because I don't know if you are like me, but like there's like a lot of life happening and a lot of fun going on, and I don't want to be feeding a sourdough starter every day. It's just too much for me to focus on. So here's our second feeding. You're going to set the timer again, put it in the warm spot, because I'm gonna bet that by the time you get to dinner time that night, like around 6 p.m., your starter will have some activity. It's okay if you look at it and you're like, did it exactly bubble up to like double? Don't worry. If it has any fluff to it, any bubbles, any activity, it's ready for you to go on to that the second part of the wake up cycle. So don't think of it like first feeding, second feeding, because sometimes you have to repeat that first feeding to get it to really wake up. But that's the first stage, let's say. So repeat that first stage if you need to. If you get to the evening and it still has not done anything, feed the jar again. Repeat that first stage of the feeding and see what it's doing when you wake up in the morning. And you're basically going to start over again there. Now, this is why, and I don't support feeding your sourdough starter every day. I think it's too overwhelming, and that's not what our lives are. We're not like on the prairie anymore, and that's the only thing we focus on. But sometimes you need to do that feeding cycle, that first stage, for a couple days just to get your sourdough starter to be strong. So keep the amount that you're feeding very small so that you're not wasting so much flour and you're not ending up with massive amounts of discard. Once you see that it has fluffed up, then that's when we go to the second stage. Okay, let me see. Are there questions here? What if your starter is ready to be used, but I'm not quite ready to use it? It's okay. You're waiting like a few more hours. Totally fine. This starter that I fed last night, it was ready for me to use it a little bit ago because it's been warm. But it's okay if you're like, oh, I think it hit its highest rise, and I think maybe it's starting to come down a little bit. It's fine, because when you go to make your dough, that is like giving the sourdough starter the biggest feeding of its life, and it has so much good flour and goodness to like gobble up, and that's what makes that natural yeast grow. So it's okay if it's going to be a couple hours. Okay, let's say that you fed your starter, it hit its highest rise, and when you woke up in the morning and all of a sudden life happens and you're like, I don't have time for it today, take the jar and put it directly into the fridge. It's going to pause it. And if you have time later that evening or even the next morning, it's still strong enough for you to bake with. Because like if I put this into the fridge, it's only gonna like sink basically maybe half an inch by tomorrow. It takes quite a few days for this to really like lose all of its like strength and vibrancy. So let's say that it was ready and you just don't have time that day, put it into the fridge and then try to use it the next day. If you don't have time the next day, don't worry about it. You'll just start that feeding cycle again, and you have a lot of really healthy, strong starters. So you won't need to do this first stage of the feeding. This first stage of the feeding is if your starter has been dormant for a while, or you're having trouble with your bread not coming out fluffy with big air pockets and like soft. If that's the case when you're getting to your bread, and let's talk about like why your bread would be flat. Okay, well, there's lots of different reasons, but I think you always go back to the first thing, which is your starter. That's your foundation. If your starter is like doing really good, getting strong and filling the jar, then you can know in your mind, my starter is strong. Okay, let's go to the next stage. What could be possibly wrong in the next stage? So the next stage could be recipe. I haven't tried all the recipes. Like if you're not doing our exact recipe, I can't speak to that recipe that you're using. But also, even if you are using our exact recipe, your kitchen climate, where you live, the temperature of the air outside, all of those factors come into play, because sourdough is this like miraculous natural yeast. And it responds to the environment, just like we do. You walk outside and it's cold and you're like, ooh, oh my word, it's cold. The sourdough starter responds the same way. If it's really, really cold where you are right now, everything's gonna go slower and you're gonna want to give it some more time to hit that high rise. For a flat loaf though, the other thing that I really want you to try, if your dough is very easy for you to work with, so it's not sticking to your hands, like you can easily shape it, then I would say if you're getting a flat loaf, it could be that you're not creating enough tension. So let's get to the tension part in a minute. Okay, yeah. Gladys just was saying about it being underproofed. Yes, it could also be that your dough is underproofed. So let's finish this feeding and then we'll talk about the dough. But if you can see that your first stage, you're like, it's doing really good, then you're gonna go on, and it's like fluffing up and it's active, then you're gonna go on to the second stage, which is when you do those bigger ratios. Because what we have in our jar right now is 45 grams of starter. And so because this is not active, I'm not gonna add a bunch of stuff to it because I don't need to have that much discard sitting around and I don't have time to use all of it right now. But if yours is reacting really good with that first stage of the feeding, then I want you to go to the second stage, which is when you're going to add that 200 grams of water, 200 grams of flour. Now here's why you're doing a completely different ratio. And I will say, you're gonna need a bigger jar. This pint jar works great to get it going because it's not so big to like get down in there. But when you go to do your next feeding, I want you to use a quart-sized jar, because when you feed it, it is going to be like, it's gonna come up here to the top of the jar. And if you feed it in this, it's gonna like overflow it, okay? So you're gonna do that next feeding in here. And the reason you do the bigger ratios is because I don't want it to react as fast. When you do a 1:1:1 ratio, which is what this is, so if you see in a recipe, it says 1:1:1:1. They're saying 1:1:1. That means you're using the exact same amount of starter as flour as water. You're using the same one. It's all the same amounts. When they say, oh, it's a 1:2:2 or 1:3:3, then that means that you're using 1 part starter, 3 parts flour, 3 parts water. When we do the big feeding, we're doing a 1:4:4 for the most part. I realize 45 grams is not 50. If you do the math, you'll be like, Kelly, that's not 4 times 45. You can go exact if you want, but your starter's gonna be okay if you give it a little extra flour and water. But the reason why I like the 1:4:4 is because I can feed my starter in the evening when I am making dinner or going to bed. I feed it that, and it will work all night long for 10 to 12 hours on this slow rise. The bigger the ratios, the longer it takes for your sourdough starter to respond and like wake up. The smaller the ratios, 1:1:1, that's the fastest amount of rise time, because you're putting more starter in with the flour. This jar had very little starter and lots of flour and water. And so it just takes longer for that sourdough yeast to like work its way through the whole jar. So just know, if it's a small ratio, it takes a small amount of time for it to react. That's why you're checking it after 4 hours. When it's a big ratio, it takes a longer amount of time to react. And so that's why it can sit on the counter and go all night long, which is why I like the big ratio, because I don't want to have to worry about this thing growing out of the jar, and it hit its highest rise when I was in bed, and I'm not ready to bake at 1 o'clock in the morning. So that's why we do the bigger ratio. Oh, okay, you missed the explanation about the hooch. Just know I will put this video onto the channel so you can go back and watch it. So come back and watch that part because I'm gonna keep going because I don't wanna keep you all too long. We've already been chatting for 30 minutes. Oh my goodness, you guys are so amazing. Okay, let's go back to the underproofed. So let me move these things. Let's get all of this out of the way. We're gonna get the dough out from the big batch that I made. I think I made this last week, but I can't remember. Sometimes I forget when I made it. Okay, let me see. Was there other questions? Okay. Chris has a big batch of the dough, and he's wondering if he can make pizza with it. Yes, you can make pizza with it. We do have a different recipe that I use for the most part for pizza, mainly because we like to make the pizza in our pizza oven, and I need the dough to be less sticky and easier for me to work with because I proof it for like several hours during the day so that it starts to fluff up and rise, and then I pat it out and we throw the pizzas into the pizza oven. And there's a whole video on how to do that. Plus, I feel like the pizza dough recipe, it's just like a firmer dough. And so it's easier for me to do pizza with it. The pizza dough, you could make bread with it, but it makes, the bread ends up being like a little bit more, I don't want to say dense because it's still delicious, but it has very, very small air bubbles in it. So when you use the big batch, this big batch, we make the rustic loaves, like oval or the round. You can get fancy with like how you score it. We use it to make focaccia, which is really very, very similar to pizza. Rolls, hamburger buns, sandwich bread. So this big batch of dough can be used for like so many of the basic breads. When we make pizza with it, I just find that it's a little bit chewier than the pizza recipe, but you can still do it. It's still delicious, but it's like when you start becoming like quite a connoisseur of your sourdough, then you start getting picky about it. Okay, so here is my dough. Look at all of those bubbles. This dough has been in the fridge proofing for quite a while, and it's kind of sticky. So when there's liquid or condensation gathering in your container, that typically happens for me when the dough has been proofing for a long time. So one of the questions that I've been getting though is, okay, I made my big batch. Do I have to wait until tomorrow to bake with it? You don't. You can bake with it the exact same day, but you want to make sure that you take your portion out. And I like to use 900 grams when I do a loaf, like a rustic loaf, which I should see how much is left in here. But if you're gonna bake with it the exact same day, then you just wanna make sure that you shape that loaf and then you allow it time to proof in that proofing basket, or if you're gonna do a sandwich loaf, give it time to proof in there for a couple hours before you put it into the oven. It can, and it is proofing in the fridge, but it's going slower. And because remember, our starter was fed with those like bigger ratios, so it creates a bread that will proof for a very long time. So I actually really like the bread the same day. It's slightly different than if you bake with it like a couple days later, and it's actually kind of fun to see the difference between it. But even after the dough has sat for a couple weeks, it still makes a really, really beautiful loaf. So if your bread is coming out flat, these are the steps you're gonna do. You're gonna go back and check your starter because you wanna make sure your starter is very strong. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, this is 928 grams, so it means that I took a little less dough out at some point. Okay, so if your bread isn't coming out the way you like it, you want to go back and check your starter. Make sure that your starter is really strong. When I am baking on a regular basis, and there is like starter from, so like this jar right here. I'm not gonna use all of this for the recipe. I'm gonna make some babka because it's Aaron's birthday this week, and so we're gonna have some babka. But I don't need all of this for that recipe, so anything that's left over, I'm gonna scrape out and I'm gonna put into my fridge jar. And that action of you baking and putting some of it back into your fridge jar makes your fridge jar of starter stronger. And you will notice that if you're consistently baking, your bread gets better. And it's getting better because you have practice, but it's also getting better because your dough is getting this like beefed up and stronger starter. So don't give up. Like if you're just getting like in the rhythm of it, keep going, because as your starter gets stronger and you have more practice, your bread starts to get better. And the starter kind of does the work for you. Okay, so the next thing that I want you to think about for your loaf, if it's really flat, is your dough like unworkable, like it's too sticky? If it's too sticky, add some flour into it, because the ratios might be just a little off for your climate, your altitude, your kitchen, all of those things come into play, okay? Now, this is getting a little sticky because it's been proofing in the fridge for so long. So just know the longer it proofs, it does get a little floppy. Okay, the next thing I want you to think about is the tension. And we'll do another live just about like shaping it, because this dough I can tell is gonna be floppy. But if you are not squeezing the heck out of that sourdough, it does not have anything to like push against, which is what allows it to rise. So I know that I had to like really make myself squeeze the heck out of it, because when you make anything with yeast, you're letting that dough rise, and you don't want to squeeze the heck out of it because you just pushed all of the like rise out of it. Sourdough is different. It wants you to squeeze it. And if you aren't creating enough tension, it will be flat. So when you create the tension, this is the dough straight out of the fridge, and I'm working with it straight out of there. And I'm gonna tell you another tip in just a second, but I get it kind of shaped, and then it sits on the counter for a few minutes because I move all my stuff out of the way, and then let me get my basket. Let's get the Banneton basket out. Okay, here's the basket. I get it all prepped with the flour, and I just like to use the cloth in here with flour. You can use it straight in the basket. The cloth doesn't have to be in there. Some people like the rings that it makes, and it is actually super pretty. But I just have gotten so used to using it this way. This is where there's like so many ways that you can do it right, okay? My basket is ready. My dough has sat here for a little bit. It's still very cold. And now we're gonna hang it. We're gonna let it kind of droop down a little bit. Then you're going to bring that bottom part up, and we're going to kind of sew it back and forth. And we're pulling it, and we're just working with it. We are going to just squeeze the heck out of this thing, and I just pull it because this is gonna be a circular one. I'm pulling it and tucking it again and again and again. So this is exactly what you would do if you're gonna bake the same day. You're gonna take that dough out and you're going to shape it, okay? This is such a floppy loaf. Then I'm rolling it. We are going to give this so much tension. And into the basket it's gonna go. Because my dough is sticky, look, it's sticking to my hands, I'm actually gonna put some plastic wrap over it and pop it into the fridge, and it's going to proof in there in this shape for an hour or so. Then I'm gonna take it out, turn it out, and I'm gonna score it and bake it. So if your dough is giving you problems and it's like sticking to your hands, you're having problems with it, let it proof in the fridge. If you just made that big batch of dough though, and you wanna bake with it that same day, you want it to proof on the counter because you need it to be in a warm spot that it is going to like be able to get that sourdough starter working through all of the dough. Now, this is the last thing. Let me wash my hands real quick. Okay, last thing, and then I'm gonna see if there's any other questions I can answer. Sourdough is not like yeasted dough, as we've already said. When it proofs in here, you're not going to see that it has doubled in size or risen. So don't wait until you see that happening, because then what happens is it overproofs, which also makes your dough or your bread flat. So once we get it shaped and it's in the Banneton basket, I set my timer, and this is gonna go in the fridge, so I'm gonna set my timer for 2 hours. Then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna bake it. If it's resting on the counter, 1 hour, and then bake it. You don't want it to overproof because there is literally nothing you can do if it's overproofed. If you make a batch, like you make some bread and you still have more dough in the fridge and you're like, oh, that bread was kind of like, it didn't fluff as much, you then can allow that dough in the fridge to proof longer, or add a little more flour into it if it was really hard to work with. You can adjust it. But if it overproofs, there's nothing really you can do except make some focaccia bread. Focaccia bread is the easiest thing to make because it really just has to like spring a little bit. Okay, let's see. Are there other questions? Okay, what temperature do you usually cook your bread to? My goal is to get it to where it's like between 195 and 200. And when you put that thermometer in, push it all the way down till you feel the bottom of your loaf, and then pull it up halfway. You want to test the middle, not the bottom, but the middle. If it's at 195 or 200, then it's ready to come out. And it's so, so good to use the thermometer because sometimes the top looks overdone and then the middle isn't. And so then you're trying to figure out if something's going on in your oven. Okay, Judy's asking, is the fridge jar the same as a discard jar? Yes, because guess what? When I go and make my babka, I'm gonna have leftover leaven. So when it's a fed starter, this is leaven. My leftover leaven is discard, and my discard goes back into my fridge jar. So that mother starter that I started with like years ago from my friend has now been fed and fed and fed and fed. So you don't need to keep a starter jar and a discard jar because they're the same thing. And I don't know who came up with all this terminology because it confuses people, and I was confused too. And I was like, discard, like I should throw it away? Keep it. There's so many good things you can make. Okay, a favorite discard recipe. Well, okay, it depends on the time of year. Right now, we are making loads of pancakes with our discard, and that recipe is on the channel in the sourdough playlist. Waffles are also one that we do tons. Those are like huge hits in our house because our kids are all in high school. They love it. I mean, I love it too, but they eat way more than I do. Okay, some of the other recipes that I love, some of these haven't made it onto YouTube yet, but we're getting there. And as we get into some different seasons, they'll make it on here. But on our blog is a recipe for molasses crinkle cookies with sourdough discard. They are so good. But I typically make those in the fall because it has spices and molasses. But honestly, you can make them anytime. There's also some other recipes that haven't made it on yet. muffins, brownies. There's so many ways that you can use it. And here's a very, very short explanation on if you want to adjust a recipe that you have and use your discard, you can literally do that to any recipe that calls for some liquid and flour. You can sub your discard in. And the easiest way to do it is essentially if you're going to put half a cup of discard in, then you take out 1/4 a cup of liquid and 1/4 a cup of flour from whatever that recipe is. And there's so many great recipes online. You can go test one out and let us know if you love it. Okay, let's see another one. Oh, you've had good results with the stand mixer. Good. I love using the stand mixer. When I realized that big bakeries use stand mixers, I thought I've got to figure out how to use it because it makes it really so much easier for those big batches. And okay, how long is the last proof on the counter? Okay, I think I touched on that, but in case I didn't, if your dough is flopsy, cover plastic wrap into the fridge 2 hours. If your dough is not flopsy, it's not really sticking to your hands, it's doing good, cover it with parchment paper on the counter 1 hour. Let's see. Oh yeah, okay. Chris, this is so good. He's like, being a yeast bread baker, I get confused and I start doing the wrong things with the sourdough. I completely agree. I feel like I had to relearn baking with sourdough because it reacts so different, and it's super cool because it's natural yeast, and so it's really learning how to give it the best environment and let it work its magic. It's why I don't do a lot of mixing with our dough, because I've found that the more that the sourdough can work its magic through all of that flour, then the bread is softer, it's tastier. When we try and cram it all together, which is essentially what you do with yeast, is you're getting it to go fast. If you try to do that with sourdough, it can ruin your texture and make your dough, it can make the dough and bread a bit more gummy. So it's really fascinating. Mix less, let the sourdough do the work. Okay. Oh, the bagels. No way you said, okay, Chris says that the bagels are better than Panera. That's so awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining me in the kitchen. This has been so fun. I like being able to just chat with you and answer the questions. When I am back to being able to use this little bit of starter that's in the fridge, I'll try to do another live on waking it up and what we're gonna make, and I'll bring you along for that. And oh, let's see. Oh, good. Your starter's so happy. Violet is talking about how our starter's so happy, but it continues proofing to incredible size and actually broke a shelf. Oh my word. Okay, well, maybe let's not put it on that shelf. How much starter are you feeding? Is it big starter? Little shelf? What's happening? Maybe don't use that shelf. And I'm so glad that it's so happy. So if your starter is growing, and you're like, oh my word, I can't handle it, put it into the fridge. Then it can just pause in there. So, oh, the dough kept proofing. I see. Okay, Violet said that the dough is what broke the shelf. In your fridge? Oh my word. Okay, sometimes my dough busts out of those Canberra things, because even though the fridge is cold, it knows when it is summertime. And so just know, sometimes you need to split your dough up. If your dough starts breaking out of the container, don't worry, you don't need to punch it down. This isn't yeast bread. Cut out half of it and put it in a different container, and hopefully you have space in your fridge for it. Okay, Mr. Late Shift. How long can you keep the starter in the fridge after feeding it before you have to feed it again? Oh, Mr. Late Shift, you don't have to feed your starter when it's in the fridge. The starter that's in the fridge, It can stay in there for a year, 2 years, and you could do nothing with it. I'm gonna post this video, go back and watch the beginning, but also I have a really great video all about the starter, how to work with it, and why I only feed it when I'm gonna bake, so that you don't have to worry about feeding the starter ever in your fridge. Any upcoming in-person classes? Well, okay, the next class that we have coming up is all about flowers. Do you wanna come and play with the flowers from our cutting garden? That would be super fun. We are planning to do a pie making class in the fall. We, of course, will do a sourdough class. We typically do that one in February. We do soup and sourdough. We do different things all throughout the seasons, but I have to leave now. I would keep on chatting. This is so much fun. You have encouraged my heart by showing up and being here, and I look forward to doing another live with you all very soon. And now I'm going to try and turn this off without looking so awkward. Oh, Miso, perfect. You're gonna come. Yay, come and hang out. Yes, pie Rita. We're gonna make homemade pie, and I'm hoping that we can do the class when our apple trees have all the apples, and I have these really fun pie pans. We love hosting stuff in person. So if you are in the Seattle area, go to ciderpresslane.com. That's our business name. That's where all of the event tickets are. That's where you can buy our cookbook. We have an e-cookbook that's all of our treats, and I'm working on an e-cookbook with sourdough goodness in it. So much goodness to come. Is using butter. Oh, now you're giving me more questions. Oh goodness, I gotta stop reading it because I really do. I have to go. So I'll talk to you all soon.